Good evening, everybody. I'm going to call this meeting to order. Ask for a roll call.
Dr. Campley? Here. Mr. Dorr? Here. Mrs. Evans-Brockett? Mr. Fountain?
Here.
Mr. Keenan?
Here.
Dr. Kohler? Here. Mrs. Mayers? Here. Mr. Saylor?
Here.
Ms. White? Here.
Thank you. Please join me in the reciting of the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'm looking for a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
Hold on one second before we go there. The mission statement of the Perkman Valley School District is to cultivate an inclusive community of learners, empowered to grow intellectually, socially, and emotionally. And then I'll look for a motion to approve the agenda as presented. And a second.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Looking for a motion to approve the minutes as presented for April 11th, 2023 and May 1st, 2023. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. And the ayes have it. I'm going to hand everything over to Board's Vice President, Mrs. Mayers, for a very special presentation tonight.
Thank you. Approximately 62 student volunteers from Schwenksville Elementary are part of the 5th grade service club. These students are passionate about making a difference in the world. They participate in monthly meetings under the leadership of Mrs. Hyman, counselor for all 5th grade. And they discuss the possible projects that will serve our community in positive ways. You will learn about some of the projects from our service club members this evening. Mrs. Strano, who is also a counselor at Schwenksville Elementary, initiated the club last year. The 5th graders at Schwenksville will find the work to be quite rewarding. Mrs. Hyman, Mrs. Strano, and the 5th graders are assisted by Mrs. Fry and Mr. Bowder. Congratulations, Schwenksville 5th grade service club members, on the projects you have completed this year. Your compassion, acts of kindness, and overall desire to do good for the community are admirable. You make PV proud. Thank you for your service, and I'm going to turn it over to the principal of Schwenksville. Thank you. Mrs. Venza, thank you.
Good evening. Those who can say it best, we're going to have students talk to you tonight about what they did in service club. And just a reminder that all of the students volunteered. This isn't something they have to do, and they've given up their recess time to be able to help with different service projects that they've done this year. And I want to give a thank you to Mrs. Hyman, our counselor, who has spearheaded it this year, and to Mrs. Strano, our other counselor, who started it last year. So at this time, I'm going to ask Caitlin Bujansky, Mia McCade, and Harper Rogan to come up.
Hello. Oh, sorry. Hello. My name is Caitlin Bochansky.
Hi, my name is Mia McCabe.
And my name is Harper Rogan. We're here on behalf of the 5th grade service club of Schwenksville Elementary School. We are a team of 62 leaders who are on a mission to make a difference in our community.
We chose to miss recess one time per month to work on our passion projects.
The club was created in 2021-2022 school year by Mrs. Strano. This year, we are led by our 5th grade school counselor, Mrs. Hyman.
We share common goals to give back to the community and spread kindness. We connected with each project because they stand for something that we are passionate about.
So far, we have had 3 very successful projects. Project 4 is coming soon, but shh, the staff doesn't know it's for them.
First, we collected items such as dog and cat food, leashes, collars, toys, blankets, towels, and snacks for animals waiting for their forever home. We hung up posters up all around the world, all around the school to spread the word.
Next up, we made Valentine's decorations for the patients of the Markley Rehab and Healthcare Center to spread some joy.
Then we collected snack donations for the family staying at the Ronald McDonald House of Philadelphia while their child is being treated in the hospital. We included cards with positive wishes for the families.
Here are some insights from some of our fellow leaders.
Thank you to the school board for showcasing our hard work. Thank you to Mrs. Venza, Mrs. Hyman, Mrs. Strano, and Mr. Bowder, and Mrs. Fry for helping us to make this club a success.
Thank you.
At this time, could we have all of our members stand up so they could be recognized too? If I could just take 1 second, I want to go back to that slide that had the heart, because these are the reasons that the students listed as why they wanted to get involved with the service club. So some of them are to learn about accepting others, being kind to our teachers, doing nice things, make someone's day better, tell someone they're awesome, give back to the community, make ourselves proud, stand up to bullying, support animals in need, help the community, to love the world, hold doors for people, be kind, have compassion, help sick children, and love is all you need is their message. So thank you very much to our 5th graders and to our advisors, and thank you for having us tonight.
So, Mrs. Venza, on behalf of myself and our Board of School Directors, we commend the students. Your efforts are admirable, boys and girls. We'd love to get a picture of you. So we'll take a few minutes and move you out into the lobby and take a picture. We also have a certificate for each student to recognize the good work that you've done, and we hope it continues. So thank you for taking the time out and coming this evening to be recognized, and thanks to families too. Great work.
Okay. Go to comments. Do you have the timer? Comments from the audience. We have Melissa Overholser. We will wait. Would anyone else like to speak before Melissa? And we will wait. Okay.
There we go. Good evening. Melissa Overholser, Skipback Township, and I'm the Schwenksville Elementary Librarian. But I'm not here to talk about books tonight. I'm here to challenge the district to change their narrative on something. The narrative that our students hear. I know as an educator, my job is to educate students. But as my own children went through PV, I realized even more how important educating our students is. And I'm not talking about how many AP or honors classes we have available or how high a student's GPA is. I realize that as a district, as a community, and as a society, that we need to prepare our students for the various options their future holds. My daughter is finishing up her junior year of college at Towson University, where she is studying forensics chemistry. She left PV with only having taken one AP class purely because she liked chemistry, and 3 honors math classes over the course of her 4 years. She got into college of her choice, which was Towson for forensics. She's doing fantastic in college. My son, he just finished his freshman year at Pennsylvania College of Technology, where he is studying welding and fabrication engineering. He only took 3 honors classes, again in math, through his time at PV. He got into his college of choice. But he chose a trade college versus a college. It's important for us to help that narrative change. Both of my kids were very different in school. One was highly focused on school and had to work hard for every grade she earned. She did activities, worked through high school. The other survived because he chose to go to tech school part-time for 3 years. Going to tech school allowed him to learn a trade that he absolutely loves. He was able to do a co-op at a local business in Skipback. Some of the best life skills he learned were from his time at tech school and on the football field with the coaches we have that teach our students more than just about the game. Oh, and they were a winning team while he was here. The purpose of me providing a background on my kids is I feel strongly that we need to help every single one of our students succeed in life. Some students want to go on to college. Some want to go to a trade school. Some might want to serve our country through the military. Some might want to join a family business, or maybe even start a business of their own right out of high school. And there are some that getting that job at the grocery store, putting cans on the shelves, is a sign of success for them. We, as a district, need to help every single one of our students feel successful and that they can succeed in life. We have to change our narrative and help them realize that success is different for everyone, that not everyone is going to college. And as a district, we need to acknowledge the paths that every single one of our students take as they leave the Valley. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to make a public comment? Seeing none? Yes? Just give your first and last name and what
Are we
township.
able to do this without registering ahead of time? But
That's
my name is Robert McCarthy. I'm a resident of Skippack Township. A couple items, just very briefly. I understand there's some discussion about banning books. And I want to tell you that I think it's extremely important to trust the people who are professional educators in the school district and leave that subject alone. Number two has to do with safety for students and perhaps all of us. With perhaps 50 mass shootings in this country over the last 4 months, as a school board, you are concerned about that and talked about having special armed person here. I don't know if that's even allowed by law. But nevertheless, what I think is extremely important is that people who are concerned for the future of children and protection of them need to be speaking out both on a statewide and national basis about proper weapons controls, simple, sensible ones, and also banning assault weapons. Thank you.
Would anyone else like to make a public comment? Seeing none, we'll move on to reports and presentations. We have a special presentation today on the Educational Equity Plan. Mr. Willits?
This is my clicker here. This is for the slide deck. Thank you. Good evening. I'm Steve Willis. I'm the Coordinator of Equity and Inclusion and Community Engagement here in Perkins Valley School District. I'm going to raise this up so I don't have to bend over. Happy AAPI month and also Jewish Heritage Month here in May. So the last few months, me along with a few board members as well as members of the community have been working on the Equity Action Plan, which is designed to go into place for the 23-24 school year. We had about 47 people sign up. At any given meeting, we would have around, at most, 28, and we had a little bit less at different times. We started in November, so we did our best to pull everything together for this point in time. What I'm going to share with you tonight is a bit of the process that we went through. I believe that the board has received the draft of the action plan. And then if there's any questions at the end, I will gladly answer any questions. So the purpose of the Equity Action Plan is actually derived right out of the Policy 832. Policy 832 calls for a district educational equity action plan shall contain clear accountability goals and metrics to address the inequities. So when you see the action plan, what you do see are goals that are set. I'll go through how we got through that process, but also measurable implementation pieces, right? What it can look like over a year. Also, the plan calls for reflective of the voices of administrators, teachers, staff, students, families, and members of the community. I believe we did cover all of those pieces at various times, but we certainly had members of the community come out. Families were there at times, even bringing their own little ones with us sometimes, which was great to see. Students were involved, which is always awesome to get the voice of students. Staff, teachers, and administration were all present at different times. The outcomes, again, this was designed and pulled directly from Policy 832. We're going to identify and address barriers. And I should also mention that one of the things that we do before every meeting is go through these processes, right? This was something that we were focusing on. So we did go through the outcomes with the purpose to make sure that we were staying focused. We were looking to cultivate achievement and or opportunity gaps for students. We were trying to figure out, this is really weird. Is that better? Can you still hear me? Okay. In a former life, I was a cheerleader and did not use a microphone. But I understand. So we're also looking to ensure educational achievement is neither predicted nor predetermined by implicit or explicit bias. We embedded equity practices throughout the district educational system. Again, we're looking at the system as a whole, including equity goals and practices in the district's comprehensive planning strategies. So the comprehensive plan of the district, it was available to us, and we had that as a document to use. Ensure performance observations encompass consideration of the expectations of the goals of the district, right? So those goals were set by the district. We had 8 main focus goals, and we added one more, which we'll go through here in a split second. I'll share those focus goals with you. Just so you kind of know, I mentioned that we were here for about 6 months. We started back in November, and we went right up through the beginning of May. Right, May 3rd was our last meeting, and that wasn't an official meeting. I gave the draft to the committee, and the committee had an opportunity to review on their own and give feedback. So the system that we used was actually derived from street data. Street data is the work of Dr. Jamila Dugan, who's right here. She is from Philadelphia. She's a wonderful story. She actually dropped out of high school and out of frustration, and then decided to go back to college, finish her GED, and then go back to college, and now is a leading authority in this work. And Miss Shane Saphir, who currently lives in Canada with one of her children, and she's also from California. Dr. Dugan is also right now in California. But to kind of give you an idea of how we got this information, how we derived to this point to glean the information for the Equity Action Plan, what we started off with was street data, and street data is qualitative data, right? That's having conversations with people, getting their opinions, getting a feeling for where they're coming from and their experiences. So that gives us a foundation for what we're seeing across these 8 focus areas, which I'll share with you in a second. Then we went to map data. So if you can kind of picture this, we're kind of rising, right? So street data is right here at the surface. If you want to think about your Google Maps, you're zoomed all the way into your street, right? If you pull out just a little bit, you're looking at your map data. Your map data is information that is further from the ground in comparison to street data, but provides a GPS, right? You can still see the streets, right? And it allows for us to kind of get an idea where we're going. It gives us trends on social emotional work, cultural learning, and trends within the school community. This would include things along the lines of our local testing, our STAR testing, our climate surveys, and things that are along those lines. They are longitudinal in some cases, and they are also quantitative. So that is one big difference between street data and map data. So street data is qualitative, experiential, versus map data, which is going to then become quantitative, and we look for longitudinal data across a period of time. Sometimes we can get that, other times it was for 1 year. Lastly, we use satellite data, and satellite data is our furthest point, right? So we've gone from the street to the map, and now we're hovering just outside the, that would be the ionosphere, sorry, science teacher here, in space, and we are looking at, we're using satellites, right, to give us a bigger picture, and that includes like our keystones, our PSSA scores, right? So that is a further view. It doesn't give us the individual pieces. And again, that's going to be quantitative. And that does include also our attendance for students, our graduation rates, discipline records, so on and so forth. All right, so I mentioned the focus areas a few times. We did have 8 of them, and then we added the one more on the first night. So the first of these is policy and procedure. We looked at curriculum and instruction, workforce diversity, community partnerships, welcoming in inclusive environments, data analysis, professional development, financial resources, and then who or what are we missing was the final component of that. And these 8 were put forth by the district and came with goals that were written out, and they were shared with the group. And then the last one we added as just to make sure, right, because we're talking about an equity action plan. What we're trying to do is make sure that we have as many voices and get all voices heard. That was part of the plan in the nutshell. So, for example, on any given evening, we were working with map data for this example. the team may have been given, they were given a separate slide deck for this one. It was probably going to be the night where I handed out to them the data related to the climate survey, also data related to our demographics, because as you can see here, we're talking about identifying a focus area. Example would be workforce diversity. The data would show that Black or African American staff accounts for 1.4% of all staff, while Black or African American students account for 4.5% of student population. From that, we can set a goal, right? Because that is data that has been gleaned. From that, we can glean a goal: recruit and retain more Black or African American staff through partnerships with local institutions and/or organizations. All right. Action steps: formation of an equity task force subcommittee. Again, the board has seen the draft of the equity action plan, and I believe for every single one of the areas I have suggested, or we have suggested, really the building of a focus area committee, 1 or 2 people. So formation of an equity task force subcommittee to work with administration, human resources to develop relationships with local institutions and organizations. One thing I would like to point out is that coming out of this equity action plan, as you read through it and as the public gets to see it, what you're going to notice is that it's no one person's job, right? So it is spread out across the community to build this equity work. It is not the focus of just superintendents or HR or teachers or the board. It is spread out across people so that this work can actually get done in an efficient and effective way. So here's an example of what you might see. Or actually, this is run from the workforce diversity. So goals are there at the top. Diversify staff in all buildings, improve morale, implement practices that promote or increase pools of diverse applicants and positions across all employee groups. Timeline was the same for all groups, right, for every goal. We set it to begin here in July of 2023 and then run through June of 2024 because per the policy, it is a 1-year policy. It is a 1-year action plan and then to be revisited again. So there you see the persons responsible, focus area 3 group, a committee of Focus Area 3 committee, Director of Human Resources, building level PVIS teams. We're talking about improving morale of buildings, measurable implementation as per the board policy. So we need something to measure. So has morale and staff increased? How can we do that? Surveys to gather street data. Again, that's qualitative, but it's still good to have and gives us right down at the surface what's happening. Use data to assess issues at each building. Develop building level morale initiatives, and then I added in there a progress note. Some of the things that are happening around the district are really, really good and currently starting to go in a positive direction across the district. One that I would like to point out, and I threw in here as a progress note, is the work that's happening with the PBIS for the staff at Middle School West. Middle School West is rolling out PBIS again this year. They decided to start with the staff to get a better understanding of that, and it has taken off. The morale there is really, really good. They built a stronger team unit, so they are to be applauded for that work. Next steps. So continued growth of the Educational Equity Task Force would be a good next step. Establishment of focus area committees for the EETF. Establish meetings and reporting protocols. Those things were not established out of the Equity Task Force, but are things that we should probably really think about looking at and how we're going to do this. The reporting out becomes very important. Monitoring and measuring of implementation. Excuse me 1 second. Thank you. A mid-year review of the action plan as part of the annual data presentation, which occurs in January. Right, a great deal of this information came from that data presentation. We use that for our MAP data. And then planning and preparation for an equity action plan for the 24-25 school year. Use, again, data and audit tools for future years. I believe that is my last slide.
Thank you very much.
Sure thing.
Any board members have any questions? Okay, thank you very much. Oh, sorry. I didn't hear you.
I'm wondering, oh, thank you. I'm wondering for the street data, how do you find or decide who you're going to interview, or how do you get access to the people that you want to find more information about and get that experiential data?
So are you asking how we did it for the Equity Task Force, or are you asking how it can be used in the future? They're two separate entities. I can answer both, though.
Both.
Both.
Thank you.
Cool. So what we did with the Equity Task Force is I presented the information to them with the goals that were set. We hung them up on big Post-it notes, and I gave them time to walk around, have conversation, and jot that work on the paper as they were going. And that was what we used on the second meeting as well, to kind of pull back and say, all right, here's what we're seeing, and here's what we're saying, right? So that's one way to collect it, because it is experiential, right? We want people to have the opportunity to share. Moving forward, how that can be done is generally through conversation, but also getting into spaces, right? One of the things I've done here over my time is I just enjoy being in buildings and having informal conversation with people, and it really is getting an idea of where their hearts are and where their minds are on different pieces and different things. That gives you anecdotal evidence, right? So that you have an opportunity to say, well, that's street data. If this is occurring and it's happening in multiple places, then that gives you a starting point. Then you can look at the idea of your map data. Is the map data pointing to the same thing? And can these issues be linked? Right. The beautiful part about street data, and I have to admit this, one of the reasons I like starting with street data is because it's often solvable quickly. When you look at map data, if we're using student data, that's usually months old, and we're trying to then play behind it. Satellite data is also a year old, and those students have actually moved on. So you're chasing it. Street data is right there, right? So you have the opportunity to make that change. And that goes for classrooms. If you observe a classroom space and you're seeing what's going on, you can just leave a card or a note. So that's just street data, what you're seeing in the classroom, what you're observing in the hallways, what you're seeing in the cafeteria. That's all street data, which does dovetail with PBIS as well, that which we're implementing we're using in our middle schools and a different version at our elementary schools, but same general concept. It also works well with restorative practices because it allows for you to have that conversation with a student and then try and figure out what was the actual cause. One of the things we worked on here at the high school was the migration story, right? What was the cause? What was the root of how that actually happened? How did you get here to this point? So again, that's all street data, all right? And I often caution my elementary folks that if you're going to ask a migration story, how did you get here? Be careful if you ask a kindergarten kid, because that's street data. How did you get to school today? A kindergartner will start with when they woke up, what they ate, tripped over their dog, get through the kitchen, my mom was upset, my dad was upset, then I got on the bus. They'll go through all of that for you, but that's all street data about how they got to that point. So it's qualitative, but it's so important because at some point in that story, it may be, I dropped my lunch. And that's why I'm upset, because now we're going to lunch. I don't have a lunch, right? So that's qualitative data that can be used right there on the spot. And again, street data can be solved on that spot. Does it help? Sure. Sure.
Sorry. So I'm wondering looking at workforce diversity, it looks like you're focusing on Black and African American people, and I did skim through this, and I apologize. Do you broaden that scope, looking at underrepresented populations besides but besides Black and African American populations?
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, that's it.
Yeah, so that's a wonderful question, and there is a focus there for two major reasons. One, when we look at the map data, we see that there is, as there are in many other school districts across the state and the country, a disparate performance of our Black and Hispanic students against their white and Asian counterparts. So when we start seeing that data, we need to kind of think outside the box, what's happening systemically that's causing this, right? There is work out there from Dr. Seth Gersherson and his group, I can share that with you as well, that talks about representation in schools. The representation of a student who sees one person who looks like them. If a student sees, according to Gersherson, if he sees or she sees one person who looks like them in elementary school, they're more than likely, the chance of them graduating high school skyrockets. If they see two, the chances of them completing a graduate program skyrockets. Right, so the representation doesn't have to be this massive overhaul, right? But I am very cognizant. I represent less than 2% of all teachers in the country at 1.8%, being a Black male. So when we're talking about representation, right, it becomes really, really challenging. But I can tell you, again, more street data, when I walk into a building, when I walk into a space and a student of color sees me, they light up. One of my favorite stories from this district was last year I was reading at West, and a young lady, I walked out of the classroom, I was walking along, and she sees me, and she stares at me as I walk, and I could feel it. And all of a sudden she goes, "I like your glasses." It was all she can get out to make me stop. I said, "Hi, how are you? I'm Mr. Willis." She's like, "What do you do here?" I told her, and we talked for a few minutes. But I could see it, right? I was stopped recently. I was over at Skip Back, and I walked out in a second grade classroom. I walked out. Teacher said, "Can you come back for a second?" I said, "What's going on?" She's like, "The student couldn't stop staring at you. His dad has locks, and he sees you." Cool. Right, so that representation piece matters, right? And so that's why there's a focus there, because we know that there is, per the data for here in the district, not just nationally and statewide, that there is a underperformance of those groups.
I just have one more thing.
Sure.
So, but also there's I would advocate for an underrepresentation of people who are differently abled, some who are able to be teachers. And I know of a local school district that actually has a teacher that doesn't present as typical, but teaches a high-level science class. And so I'm wondering if this vision can be broadened.
So to broaden it using data, we would need to find more data for our district, right? So what we were using here, it wasn't broken out that way with what we did. So if that data is produced and we can see it, then that might give us something else to glean, right? But based on the data which we were using, this is what we saw. I would also add that sometimes when we think about the idea of diversity in a staff, right? If we're talking globally, generally, it doesn't have to be by race, right? So we can think of that in a different way. But again, using the data that we had, that is what the group gleaned.
Yeah. Hold on one second, Ms. White.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm wondering if you would be able to, I see the next step slide, but if you would be able to sum up and draw a conclusion based on all of the feedback that you gathered over the 6 months from the group itself. And then also, with that conclusion, did you relay kind of like a climate response to administration, just so they understand that, in other words, above and beyond these next steps, what tangible things we could do immediately to continue moving forward in this particular work?
Yeah. So I'm going to ask you to ask that first question again, please.
Do you have a summary or a conclusion of the feedback that you gathered from the dynamic of the group overall? Because I know that there are some group members in the room.
Yes.
And I was able to sit in one of those meetings as a sub.
Right.
And I just, to me, the data, especially the annual report, for example, that's very test-driven focus and all of that information. So I just want to understand from a cultural standpoint, from a morale and a climate, what you were really able to gather and draw a conclusion from.
So the morale information that was in there was coming from the climate survey that we had, and that was a result of what the district, that was 21 school year. So I know that's being done again this upcoming year, I believe, correct, Mrs. Smith? That the survey, let's talk about that. So that survey happening again will be beneficial to see if we can see some measurable pieces in there. But that's also why that landed as a goal. And then those measurable implementation pieces is morale actually improving, right? And then we can start figuring out, well, what's moving that, and then repeat that, right? Because if it works, let's keep doing it. It may work for a building, right? But it may not work for others, right? I mean, in my previous roles, I worked with science and I worked as a science teacher. What worked for my folks may not work for others, but we can at least use those good practices to keep moving things in the right direction. That's why I also mentioned that PBIS work that's happening at West. If you walk into West right now, in their office, you'll see a very big board. It's a praise board in essence. It's a shout out board. But that's also how they're drawing for gifts and swag and stuff like that. And it has worked to really galvanize that group up there. Yeah, there's going to be issues and conversations and problems, but still it's getting more and more galvanized. So does that answer your question about climate? Or is there another question I'm missing here?
I mean, I guess, you've acknowledged diversity within staff, and obviously the percentages they're unbalanced, right? That's
Yes.
something that we can recognize, we know, we can say we'll hire, that could be a goal. But
Sure.
were there tangible things that could happen immediately with regards to perhaps programming or curriculum changes or additional review items that would really help solidify some of the negative interactions that are happening in the buildings? Because I think that this year in particular, they are, as I perceive them, they're significant. And although this work, obviously is foundational, this was a good year for you to build upon laying a foundation of it. I'm curious as to understand what will happen next to actually start to repair some of the trouble. Because I think it's more than, I think that there's many components to it, right?
Yes.
So diversification of staff, for example, is certainly one of them, but truly the cultures need to change within the buildings. So I'm wondering if you were able to glean from feedback in the group what those changes could possibly be.
Yeah, there was some information in there related to the professional development pieces that I think that's where that will come out. And you will see that there's conversation around culturally responsive teaching, which was done as year one of the equity road trip, right? And if you look at the action plan, that's back in there as a revisit, right? To keep that culturally responsive teaching as something that is being engaged in, and not just a one-year thing, but a way that we actually participate with our students and engage with them, and also who delivers it. I think in the action plan, we suggested that will come from building level principals, so that again, it's coming from top down, but it's also showing the engagement in the process, and it's not just being handed over to our teachers to do, but it's something that our principals are engaged in as well. And I think that this is Steve Willis speaking, not necessarily for the group, but I believe that is what can truly start to show a change in time over time, right? Is the overall engagement in the process. As I mentioned, it's not a really good role for one person to do. If you look at the work of John Crownapple and Dr. Floyd Cobb, they'll call it out right away and say that it is a universal piece, right? To shift to belonging. That it's everyone's work every single day. So that is one of the things that I love about John Crownapple. And if you see me present somewhere else, you may have seen me use one of their, and Dr. Floyd Cobb, you may have seen me use one of their T-charts, their XY axis, which talks about unconditional belonging versus complete access, which is a big shift, right? And I think that's what you're getting at with shifting the culture, is the idea that you're talking about really moving from to true inclusion requires full access and unconditional belonging. What we tend to land at is full access and conditional belonging, which is really integration. It feels good, but it's not full inclusion per Crownapple and Dr. Floyd Cobb.
That better answers my question, and I appreciate that answer. So I guess in response to that, what I would like to see, and what I think the board and the community deserve to see, is what the go-ahead plan will be going forward with this work in the coming years. Because my concern is that although all of that's been acknowledged now, I need to understand what's going to happen now in order to feel as though all of this work wasn't just for nothing for our families. And I don't know if anybody else is willing to speak from the committee, if they have that same feeling. But that's my concern with this presentation tonight, is what the district's commitment and plan is going forward.
Ms. Evans-Brockett.
My comments kind of follow up on that, because I was a part of the equity team for years leading up to this. So it's nice to see some actual goals in place, and there are some admirable goals that I really hope this district follows through on. That being said, you are on our agenda tonight to approve for resignation. So again, that goes back to district administration, and it took us a long time to find Mr. Willis and to get that position in place. So I don't imagine it's going to be an easy find this time around. So I'm hoping that there are plans in place for people to pick up this work immediately, because it can't wait until we find that person to take on this role again. So like Ms. White said, I think we'd like some information on what that's going to look like.
Any other questions?
Comment.
Dr. Campley?
I just want to thank you for all of your work and your time and your effort. You really definitely spearheaded so much of things that we needed here in the district. My, I guess, overall caution, kind of to piggyback off of Ms. White, is this is a lot of it looking at how we can be inclusive and stats and numbers, and we come kind of back to PSSAs and how our students learning, but none of that is going to happen if we don't work on that culture piece. This is great, but we have to work on the culture piece, and hearing students' voices week after week is so telling to the fact that we are not there yet on the culture piece. And until that happens, the numbers and the data is never going to support and show that we've made any growth.
Anybody else? Dr. Kohler?
Just want to reiterate, thank you for all you did, and I'm very sad that our district is losing you. I was a part of this task force, so one of the things that I would like to see, especially in your absence, is, we did come up with some different goals, and I'd like to see the district show us how these goals are going to be addressed, whether it's smaller task forces and committees for each goal. Not all of them need that, but I think that was one of the suggestions you see throughout this plan, is having these smaller groups now. Okay, here's the problem. Let's have a focus group to address this. Because I think having big meetings is great and we get a lot of that street data, but to do a lot of this work, you really do sometimes need a smaller group so that, you can really get down to the nitty-gritty, and that's hard to do when you have a room with 40 plus people. So now that we've done that piece, I'd like to see some smaller groups kind of take different pieces of this plan and work on that, and hopefully we can do that in your absence and until we find someone, and then maybe someone can kind of take the lead on that when that happens. But that was kind of my takeaway from being on the committee, is here's all the information, now let's divide it up and have people work on some specific things.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Cheers. Good night.
Mr. Schaefer, you were not here last week. You were studying. Do you want to give a presentation today?
On my studying?
We could do that too.
Yeah, no. Yeah, so thank you, Dr. Russell, for kind of filling in the gaps last week of, we couldn't be here. It's AP week. I don't know if everybody's aware, but if you see students, wish them well. Finals are sort of upon us. APs are upon us. Keystones are upon us. PSSA, all the very fun things that students love are upon us right now. So if you see a student, wish them well. I want to call back to the students that aren't here anymore, but they were here. As the NHS president, seeing young students like this volunteer makes me extremely happy. And then as a graduating senior, seeing that the district is in the hands of what I believe to be a very good class, that's very reassuring for somebody leaving the district this year. As far as our school, it's May already. I can't believe it. Our students are sort of winding down. Like I said, we had all those tests. Sports are sort of wrapping up. Musicals are sort of wrapping up. So the year's sort of coming to a close. I will personally shout out my own event here, Spike Valley, on May 20th. Dr. Russell did a great job of that last week. The class of 2023, along with myself and the president, Michael Porbon, are doing a charity spike ball tournament. We're super excited. All the proceeds will be going to the ARC Alliance. If you want to donate, if you want to come out to just watch, be my guest. It's one of those things that I'm really proud of as a class that we were able to do. And I think it'll be a good senior send-off for all the seniors participating and who helped. So that's all I have, and thank you.
Yeah.
How many people do you have set to participate in the? We
currently, as of today, have 64 people signed up for the event. we definitely are not capping it there. So if your students still want to sign up, they have till Friday. We need volunteers. We need anybody that wants to come out and help or watch. We'll take. So there you go. Thank you. Yeah.
Mr. Schaefer, you be joining us at the next board meeting? I know it's a couple days before graduation.
Yeah, I'll be here in the first June one and then the second June one. I won't be a Perk Valley student anymore, so
There you go.
I might come and watch as an audience member. I'll never leave. So
Awesome.
thank you though.
Okay. President's report was given last week. Superintendent's report was given last week. Do you have anything to update?
I do not.
Mr. Subers, do you have anything to give?
No, just that I did provide the board a report relating to the possession of firearms issue. I would recommend that any detailed discussion of that issue be conducted in an executive committee just because of concerns regarding its impact on security of our buildings.
Any board and district committee reports? Seeing none, we'll move to the approval of the consent agenda. I'd like to amend the consent agenda to remove item 4.02 with the approval to purchase curriculum resources from the consent agenda.
Second that.
Okay. Any discussions? Seeing none, all in favor to approve the amended, motion to approve the amended consent agenda as presented, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We'll move on to education, Mr. Keenan, and 4.02 is no longer on consent.
All right, so 4.01 was May 1st, Committee of the Whole. 4.02, we have a motion to approve the purchase of curriculum resources. It's been taken off the consent agenda, so we're
Yeah. He's
talking
making a
about it.
motion.
I'm
Yeah.
making a motion, right. So I'm making a motion to approve the purchase of curriculum resources as listed, and those resources are listed in the attachment. Just let me pull
Is there a
mine up
second?
and-
I'll start discussion. I just wanted to make sure that when we are purchasing these resources, whether it's Desmos or any of the resources on there, that they are compatible with the software that our students use. I know we have issues with some of the science programs that are used right now, where the applications don't necessarily fit on the screen properly, or the applications, run a lot of memory background, and the laptops start to slow down and can't process properly. So I want to make sure that as we are buying curriculum and as we're buying other resources that are going to be put on students' computers to use, that the functionality of that product works to the functionality of the tool that the student is given.
So it would certainly be helpful if maybe the individuals that brought that to your attention could bring it to the attention of administration so that we can investigate, because we have not heard of these concerns, Mrs. Smith nor I, to this point. And it's always helpful to have those face-to-face conversations. Although I will ask Mr. Ganesh if he can speak to the compatibility, because Desmos has been in place for some time. We've had Accelerated Reader in the past, and we've had Gizmos, which I think may be the science software. I'm not sure that you're referring to, but that is a popular one. We've had those for some time, and we are not aware of concerns on the part of staff that there is an incompatibility. So it would be helpful to learn more, but I'll let Mr. Ganesh speak to some of the basics around the specs.
Great.
So, I've not heard anything about the gizmos not working properly, but typically what we do is whenever there's a curricular purchase made, we kind of go through the system requirements that the website provides or the resource provides. We make sure that it's compatible with the Chromebook. If not, Ms. Smith and I have a conversation about what devices it's going to be. So that's a typical process that we do. Specific to Desmos, we did check the screen resolutions, the memory, and the processing power. And Desmos is something that's been used pretty widely in the district, and it functions as normal. And I've searched my help desk, and I don't have any help desk requests claiming that it is not. So more information would definitely be helpful. Another thing was the Gizmos. That's a web-based science tool. Again, it's not an app that's getting installed, it's just a web-based program, and that works as intended as well. Any more information would be wonderful for us to troubleshoot further. And again, the other question posed was the updates that are being pushed out. So we typically, whenever there's an update that's coming to the Chromebook, we have a process in place that kind of staggers the updates to go out for all those 6,000 Chromebooks that we have in over a 2 weeks period. So there are steps that we have in place to manage and push out updates to these devices as and when we get them. Any questions?
Just on this topic, as it becomes more frequently brought up with software, as we more frequently implement it to teach, it would provide more opportunities for internal audits, internal questionnaires to the students that would maybe elicit some things that aren't apparent on the surface. You know, how many times did it crash for you? How many times did it lag? You know, how did you feel like it was slow at any point? Things like that. I don't know. How do you elicit that now, or is that not really something that you're asking the student body for feedback on?
So we typically rely on our help desk. Our help desk is also
Sure, I understand that, but do you get any of that information directly? Do you ask, you know, those questions of any of the students that are completing it?
typically more we rely on our tech coordinators who are in the buildings who kind of run the software. They are our first kind of boots on the ground. So they kind of help if they see any issues. They let us know by saying, "Hey, this is what's happening." You know, my team of IT specialists, they are assigned to each building, so they are also there to identify any issues and troubleshoot and fix. If it's software related, again, we bring it up to our vendor to see what the fix is, and then push those fixes across. And on any new purchase, it is our typical process to kind of see if it's compatible with our platform. Yes.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Thank you.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Mr. Keenan, you could do 3 through 7 all in one motion since they're all on consent. Yes, sir.
We approved the consent agenda, so do we need a motion for this? I mean, they're on the consent agenda. So 3 through 7 are on the consent agenda, and we did the enrollment report last week.
Dr. Kohler, business?
Thank you. Item 5.01 was the Finance Committee of the Whole. Mr. Weaver, do you have any additions to that?
I do not.
5.02 through 5.11 are all on consent. 5.12 is a motion to approve temporary support personnel agreement. Request to approve an agreement with People Share Temp Agency to provide temporary support personnel for various departments across the school district, custodial technology, secretarial, etc., and I so move.
Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it.
5.13 is a motion to approve community education agreements as listed, and I so move.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it.
And 5.14 was last week, so that concludes my section.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kolar. Payment of bills, Ms. Evans-Brockett.
Motion to approve item 6.01 and 6.02.
We have a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Thank you very much, Ms. Evans-Brockett. Professional personnel, Mr. Fountain.
Item 701 is on consent. However, I would also like to offer my best wishes, Mr. Willis, on your position. Thank you for having been here. I enjoyed working with you on the committee, and I've enjoyed getting to know you to the degree that I could.
Can you just say that all over again?
Microphone was off again.
Mr. Willis, he's going to say it all over again. Make pretend it never happened.
Could you hear me? I just wanted to make mention of the fact that while 701 is on consent, I wanted to wish you the very best of luck. It has been a pleasure getting to know you and working with you on the committee. I wish you well, and with that, I will go back to 702 through 707, all on consent. Item 708 is a motion to request approve changing the title of the district safety supervisor to chief of police. And I so move.
Any discussion? Dr. Kolar?
I just had a question. Is this just a change of job title, or were there updates made to the job description as well?
Good evening. There was also some changes to the actual job description. Those changes are in alignment with those requirements by school police to be employed by school districts. So any requirement that we had for school police, we also added those requirements for the chief of police. In addition, more of a focus on the supervision and evaluation of our school police, since that did not currently previously exist.
Ms. Evans-Brockett?
The motion is just to change the job title, and there was no mention of a change of job description there's a job description attached, but because the motion was just to change the job title, I did not realize there was a change to job description.
Well, it's not necessarily a change of job description. It's changing to a different job.
But the motion is only to change the job title.
Correct. So when your title changes from, let's say, secretary to treasurer, you also inherit the job specs for that other title.
No, we approve a new position.
And the same thing has happened with Ms. Smith when we changed, what was it, assistant 2 versus assistant superintendent. Her job description stayed the same. Her title changed. It's absolutely can be two different things.
Could be. Dr. Russell?
So what I would offer is maybe we provide the board with a little bit more explanation of that. It was not intended for us to leave that out, but I see how the motion does not align to what's actually occurred, and maybe we bring that back in June if that would be okay with the board.
I would appreciate that. I would motion to table. Thank you.
Second, I would appreciate time to be able to read this in more detail now that I know there's been changes.
And one of the things we can do is just highlight those changes and bring that to you. Okay. Thank you.
Are there any objections to the table? Seeing none, I'll rule table. Support, Mr. Fountain, thank you. Support personnel, Ms. White.
My section is on consent.
Thank you very much, Ms. White. Governance, Mrs. Mayers.
Thank you. Excuse me. First reading on the policies, 108, 705.1 to 705.2, 805.2, 90.02.
It's on 901.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Yep.
705.1, under guidelines, there lists 9 different things, I think, that it says that procedural guidelines will be developed. Will those be developed as ARs, or how will those exist?
I believe we have developed that AR, so we can review that in our safety and operations ad hoc this week, actually.
Okay, so it's one AR for all 9 of those?
I would have to review that. I'm not certain of that, but we have been looking at the ARs for these policies, yes.
Okay.
I can confirm that for the board this week, too, in our
thank
memo.
you. In 705.2, there were additions to the information about Miranda rights, that warnings must be positively acknowledged by the suspect as being understood, blah, blah, blah. Can you just provide some information as to how that works for juveniles? I'm not familiar with that for students under 18, if they can waive their Miranda rights. And then if it needs to be in there somewhere that, because what I did just Google it, and it said that the student needs to be made aware that they can contact their parents before speaking. So I'm wondering if that needs to be included in the policy.
So we can certainly look at that for the policy. We have developed an admin reg on the rights and a waiver for students so that we make sure that if students are to be interviewed by school police officers, they are presented with their rights. So that was called out in policy. We'll also look at the policy language itself, which I think is what you're asking in addition to that.
Yeah, just making sure that
for students.
Yeah,
Those
under
18.
under 18,
Yeah.
and also any students who may have any type of disability, whether that be auditory or verbal or reading. I think that was it on that one. And then on 805.2, if we do approve the change in position, does this policy need to be updated? Because right now was a change to the policy or an update to the policy that PVSD's administrator's title is safety supervisor.
Yes, we did notice that too. So we will bring that forward to the board in the event that change is approved to the job description along with the job title. Yes.
Okay. And then there's mention of school police officers shall wear the assigned metallic shield or badge provided by the district in plain view when on duty. Is that all we're requiring, or are we doing uniforms? I know that there was some different discussion there, and I don't know if there was anything landed on.
I don't know if we've landed on that either yet. Uniforms, we have talked about it as an admin team. I think that would be another conversation for us to have this week during our safety and operations ad hoc. I know that Mr. Miller has some ideas, but I don't know that we're ready to present something specific to the board yet tonight. But we have started a conversation about that. Springford seemed a little bit, I don't want to choose the wrong adjective, but we had some questions about their uniform versus, say, the ones worn by individuals at Souderton. And Mr. Miller has some ideas from his experience. So we'll put it together and prepare a proposal and maybe talk about it Wednesday also.
Okay, so that might be another update.
Yes,
to this
that could
policy.
be another update, yep.
Okay, thank you. I think that covers my questions.
I just have a couple questions. The one, speaking to what Mr. Suber said, I'm not sure, would we be possibly making additions or changes to these policies to include not just students, but other individuals and carrying weapons? Would that be a change that we made within these policies?
Which policy are you talking about?
So I can go back to 7.05 or 705 point. No, I'm on the wrong one. What is it? I'm in the wrong screen. 705.1 was it? Let me see. The one where it says the student incidents. So I guess that'd be 705.2. Every time you open it, it opens a new pop-up. But yeah, with the incidents, would we also be putting something in there potentially about what their role would be with not just students, but with other individuals that may come on the property?
Are you talking about the 15 items where reporting incidents to police officers?
Yes.
Yep.
Well, yeah.
Right here.
Yeah. I'd like the opportunity to review that and report back. A lot of that's covered by the RMOUs with the. I'd like the opportunity to review that further, but I would say that the mandatory and discretionary reporting is covered by our MOUs with the local law enforcement and the Pennsylvania State Police. And I can just check to make sure that the policy is consistent with those MOUs and the underlying legal requirement, because that comes from the Safe Schools Act.
Okay, yeah, no, I would appreciate that because, I mean, we have something in here like motor vehicle stops. That's clearly not just students. That can be any community member. So, you know, where does the line get drawn as far as what they do for community members who may be on the property versus students? I think we need to have some.
Yeah, my initial impression, it would apply to any incident on school property.
Okay. And then,
Can I just, I think
Sure.
specifically, are you talking about the report of a weapon?
Yeah, I
on
just
school
can't find it.
property? Yeah, it's number 4. So I think the question is related to,
Yes.
is that just for students or
Search
for
from
other?
students and property. It says police searches of students and property on school property must be reasonable, goes into the legality of that aspect, then has a secondary section reporting incidents to police officers. The following incidents will be referred to police officers for an investigation on assault of a student with injury, use of a weapon in an assault or attempted assault, report of a weapon or explosive on school property, possession of use of alcohol or narcotics, bomb threats, threats of physical harm to school officials or property, pornography, sexual assault, rape, burglary or theft, vandalism, arson, trespass or loitering, or grounds of school during school hours, alcohol, tobacco, vaping, and controlled substances.
Right, so my question is, are we going to be talking about extending this to not just students, but potentially community members if there is reason to believe that there is a threat, if that's considered the police department that we are as our go-to? I think that really needs to be kind of ironed out, and we need to have more conversation on where, where are things delineated. It's not just students. There are students and community members, and you go to a football game and there's something happening and you find out it was maybe an alumni or a grandma. I think we need to have some more information here for that. And then when it talks about the uniforms, again, I don't have all my numbers because I have too many pop-ups, but when we talk about uniforms and we're still talking about having weapons, and the weapons are going to and from the school, there's still nothing saying what those weapons are yet. And I'm still curious as to what types of weapons are we going to be utilizing here in Perkiomen Valley. There's all different types of guns. There's tasers, and I know tasers were mentioned. I'd like to have more clarity on that as well.
Mr. Dorr.
So, Dean, wouldn't state law and local law supersede when it came to a parent or someone at his football game? Do we need a policy written expressly for that?
So the law would.
And just to clarify, 705.2 is not a policy for this. Huh?
Go ahead.
It's for students. This is what the school police officers and what incidents they're going to be doing.
Right, but the language says students. The language says police searches of students and property. So I think that's where we need clarity.
Mr. Miller?
To answer your question, Mr. Dorr, state law would trump any policy that we create. We can certainly craft it so that it's in line with state policy. There's nothing wrong with that. We just want to be, again, careful that we're not being more restrictive or granting more things than the law would abide us to do. And to Mr. Saylor's question and to the comment from Mr. Subers about the MOU, we have to continue to follow that. It's a state regulation. The state will only accept their crafted MOU through the PDE, so that spells out a lot of these violations that you see listed here. And then we certainly always have discretion on other, I'll call them minor offenses as opposed to some of these, on whether we include law enforcement or not, whether it would be our own personnel or whether it would be calling an outside agency depending on the circumstance. So again, these discipline matters, unless they're of an emergent circumstance, would always start with administration, where the school police or any law enforcement agency for that matter would be on the outside looking in until they asked for something to be done. So whether it was during the school day or at an athletic or other event that we have on campus, again, we would always want to start that in an administrative role if possible and move it up. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah.
So to that point, I guess what I'm thinking is that if this applies to students and property, then shouldn't this only apply to the school day?
It
Because
says, okay, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Correct me. It's fine.
No, not correcting you.
Go ahead.
It's school day and the extracurricular activities.
Okay, so then I guess to Dr. Campley's point, if there's extracurricular activities and there's an issue that happens with an assault or drunkenness or whatever, I guess my concern would be who would be responsible for taking care of that issue. Do we call the state police and have the state police come in to take care of a non-student, even if it's a parent of the district, or if it's a neighboring district student that's here for the game? Or, I mean, I guess that's what to me is very unclear about this, because if it's going to be on property,
Mhm.
then that's, I think it should read, if these things occur on district property.
Sure, that would be fine. The piece of this is to, I mean, think about it like it exists currently. So if we were to have an event this evening, we would call on the state police to come here, or, you know, depending on what building we're in, the appropriate law enforcement agency. Excuse me. If when we have our own department up and running and we decide their hours are strictly from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., if it happens outside of those hours, we would again defer back to the state police. And that's much like Lower Frederick operates currently. So they have a limited time that their police department's in service, and when those hours expire during a given day, they turn their calls over to the state police. Those matters that are non-urgent, I know they address them the immediate next day that they're on, and those emergency circumstances are handled by the state police when they're received. So we can operate in that same fashion. It wouldn't necessarily be that we would be bringing people in. I mean, if we had a significant incident happening on the buildings or grounds after hours, that might call for it, but I'll call them routine incidents. Someone had a crash on school property, or there was a trespass issue or something along those lines. We would just use the appropriate agency to come and address that.
Can I ask you a specific question? So let's assume it's 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. There's a basketball game at 3:45, very similar to a basketball game I attended earlier this year, where our athletic director had to kick someone out because they were smoking pot inside the building. That's something our school police would handle, correct?
Sure,
We
they
would
could
say
assist
to the
with
school
that.
Police, this individual over here is literally smoking marijuana in the school. Go
Sure.
take care of it.
We would address that at the level, again, if it were a student, the athletic director is addressing it, that's one thing. If the athletic director comes and says it's a patron of some sort, probably turn it over to the agency to look at.
Correct.
I guess my question is, you know, we're talking about how we want to have the immediacy. One of the reasons is we want to have immediacy of police on the premises in the event of a situation, because the state police, it takes a while for them to get here.
Mhm.
So my concern is, that, okay, at that point, patron, we're going to turn it over to, like, that bothers me. When do we draw the line as far as when are we contacting state police versus when do our own police? You know, if you get contacted and you're told that there is somebody on the property who has a weapon and they're not a student, now that's a safety issue. Are we waiting for the state? That was one of the main reasons why we were having our own police force put in place, was so we weren't waiting
Right.
for state police to come out in the event of something as serious as a weapon.
Right.
So I would like clarity as far as if it's a non-student and we are here that they have a weapon that they are not authorized to have, will our police officers be the ones going up and handling that situation and asking to do a search?
Right.
And that's where I want the clarity, because right now it's just saying students. And I get that if the police are not on duty, that's one thing. That's a whole different story. It's after
Right.
6 o'clock, they're off duty. But when they're on duty, I want to know what they're actually going to be handling, because quite frankly, I'm a little concerned if it's only for students. There's a lot of times when we hear of situations and it's not a student that comes onto the grounds
Right.
that are causing the issues.
So part of that certification process that we talked about that goes before the Court of Common Pleas is where you as a board authorize asking the court for that authority. The authority to carry weapons, the authority to enforce law as your municipal police would do if you had them, the authority to issue citations. Those three specific questions are laid out in law when we go to the court. That's the questions we want to ask them. So these discussions bring that to the front for us to bring up to the court, however that's drafted and given to them to consider in that petition. And then the MOU would follow that up to give guidance to us and to any law enforcement agency that may be here to assist us. So if it was an emergent circumstance and we handled it initially, but it was, let's just say it was a homicide of some sort on the perimeter of our property and we were notified about it, that would be a significant event where we would want the state police to be involved and obviously the district attorney. So we'd work in a cooperative fashion, but the MOU will spell out exactly how far reaching we want to be or don't want to be and how we're going to handle those things if they were to arise. So anything significant like that, it's going to be my recommendation that we still embrace a cooperative agreement with the state police. We're going to end up using them for a laboratory service or some kind of detention if that's necessary. So there's no reason we can't spell that out in an MOU. And I know they exist in other districts. And again, our neighbor Springford, we use that as an example. They have those same kind of guidelines with all the jurisdictional police that they deal with over there. So.
No, I appreciate that. I definitely would like to see the language in this policy to kind of align more with what you're saying.
Right.
And not, because I just think that that word students
Right.
could possibly create an issue.
Right. I understand. Thanks.
I understand your concern. I'll definitely review it with Mr. Miller to make sure it's broad enough in coverage. The issue is whether or not that the school police officers' authority to intervene is limited to students. That's not the intent.
Right.
Dr. Kohler?
So, we've been talking about not just students, but, people coming onto our property, but what about staff? I mean, hopefully none of these things would happen with staff, but are they included in this? Is there authority for them to be searched, or if they have any of these things on their possession that they shouldn't have, like where does that fall?
Should include all persons on school property.
Right. I mean, that authority gets extended to law enforcement as if the Perkiomen Township Police Department showed up.
Where are we reading that it doesn't say that? On 7052.
Yeah, on 7052, we're talking about the section for student searches, which is sort of a greater.
It's a subgroup.
It's an expanded search parameter that is beyond probable cause for which schools are allowed to do of their students. Then we have the authority that we're talking about now, which is listed in 705.1.
Yeah.
And under 2, it says authority to possess, we took out the word authority, but to possess and exercise the same powers as are now and may hereafter be exercised under the law or ordinance by the police of the municipality wherein the school property is located, including but not limited to the following: to issue summary citations. So that is the broad grant of authority that allows the police to act as police, which we are familiar with and which the police currently have authority to do. If we had a police officer stroll in here right now, they could act according to their authority granted by law, and that is the authority that we grant under 705.1. So right. Anyway, I just don't want to say that the implication of the discussion of the section that regards students is anything but a small portion of the discussion, as it should be. And it's just about searches of the students under that one. Searches of any person on school grounds could happen pursuant to the authority granted to them as police.
Which we'll get from the MO.
And that, no, and it's also part of the school police officer court approval process. I mean, that's a specific power that is included in the petition filed with the court.
Correct.
Any other questions? Okay, Mrs. Mayers.
Thank you. Excuse me. So 9.02, 3, and 4 are all on consent. 9.05 is the approval of voting delegates, and
Just want to real quick reach out. Does anyone want to do this with me?
That's what I was going to say.
Nobody?
Past years, I'll do it.
Anyone else? Okay, so I make a motion to amend the motion to request to appoint Jason Saylor and Matthew Dorr as yada yada yada.
Okay. Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Ayes have it.
That ends my section.
Thank you very much. Any comments from the audience? Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I forgot to mention 2 things in my report, and it manifested itself in this. I want to Teacher Appreciation Week. Shout out all of our teachers who are still watching at 8:30. I don't know, but thank you for all that you do. In 13 years here, too many teachers to thank by name, but just thank you for everything you do. And also, I want to thank Mr. Miller, his team, and administration for handling the threat that that the school district received. Yesterday we received an email from our principal notifying us of a threat against the school. It was quick, it was timely, and I just want to give a thanks to making us feel a little bit safer as we walked in this morning. So that's all I got. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Comments from the audience? Yep.
Trina Sadler from Skip-Pack Township. I just want to say thank you to Mr. Willis for all of his hard work and dedication to our district. I'm very saddened that you're leaving us, but I'm excited for you to start your next journey. The work that you've done here, we hope to continue that work in your absence, but we thank you for laying a great foundation for the district to move on as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion in our district. And I hope that the administration starts to act on those goals. I don't anticipate as a community member and a stakeholder that we're going to delay the implementation of this plan. My expectation as a committee member who gave up her time to help develop this plan is that we move expeditiously to get and to start enacting these goals. And I'm looking forward to hopefully being on the committee, the interview committee, for the person that is going to take your place. They have some really hard shoes to fill. But that is my expectation as a community member, as a stakeholder, that we are going to post his position and we're going to find another qualified candidate to continue the work that Mr. Willis has started. And my expectation is that the administration is going to start implementing the goals. So I really appreciate it. I would love to be on one of the subcommittees. I'm not sure which one I want to be on yet, but I will email Dr. Russell and let her know which one I would like to participate on. Thank you so very much.
Good evening, Todd McKinney, Collegeville. Ms. Trina took my comments. But I'm also saddened by Mr. Willis's departure from Perkins Valley. It has been a pleasure working with you, my friend, in my capacity at Ursinus College, and I look forward to continuing that work in your new posting. So that's the bright spot. This again is another example of the unfortunate loss of high quality talent here in the district. And the final question I have is, do we even know why Mr. Willis is leaving? And what have we done to try to counter that? So it's a loss for the district. That's what I'd like to say.
Anyone else like to give a public comment? Absolutely, sir.
Hi, my name's Aspen Bradley, Skip-Pack. I mean to say this in the least aggressive way possible, but seeing what 7.08 was, in my opinion, highly inappropriate to change that to be a police chief position. We're not a police area. We're not a police school. We are a public high school. We're not a prison. And in order for us to have a police, I agree we should have a police chief, but that should not replace every other type of security that we have, any other kind of position that oversees all kinds of security in the school from the everyday basis, not just police perspective. That's not for me to say I don't think that should exist. I don't know if I believe that should exist or not, but I don't think that should replace anything. I think that could be an addition. Thank you.
Would anyone else like to give public comment? Seeing none, comments from any of the board members? Mrs. Mayers.
Thank you. I just wanted to congratulate Unified Track today. They had a regional track meet. There were 5 other schools participating. These are the schools that unfortunately aren't able to staff going to states, so they weren't participating. There were 2 groups participating, but PV came in first place. So congratulations to all the athletes and partners, and thank you to all the coaches and volunteers for your support. That's it.
Any other board members? Dr. Russell?
So I too would just like to thank Mr. Willis for his service to the district, and I do wish him well as he moves on to a neighboring district, and I am confident he will continue to do good work. So he has left a mark here with us in Perkiomen Valley, and we will build upon some of the work that was started and continue in a way that is much stronger based on his perspective and the conversations that he has facilitated and led. So thank you for that, and best of luck.
Anyone else? 10.03 is a notice of video